There is a moment that happens in financial advisor offices across this country every single day. Someone walks in at 65. They have worked for 40 years. They showed up. They raised children, paid taxes, built something that looked like a life from the outside. They sit down across the desk with a reasonable expectation, not wealth, not extravagance, just the quiet security that 4 decades of work was supposed to produce. The advisor pulls up the account summary. There is a pause before the screen gets turned around. Not a long pause, just long enough to contain everything that is about to be said. The number on the screen is $91,000, not $91,000 per year, $91,000 total. Every retirement account, every saved dollar, the entire financial result of a 40-year working life sitting in one number on one screen. The person across the desk does the math involuntarily, the way you do math when the numbers matter enough that your brain starts before you give it permission. Social Security at $1,900 per month. Savings drawn down at the safe withdrawal rate, adding maybe $300. Total monthly income somewhere around $2,200. And then the other math starts. The rent, the medications, the car, the groceries, the thing that breaks without warning, the grandchild's graduation gift you want to give but cannot. This is not a story I am constructing for emotional effect. This is the median retirement reality in the United States right now. Half of all Americans who retire have less than $91,000 saved. Half. The middle. The average. The number that represents most people's actual financial outcome after most of a lifetime of work. My name is Zik. And today I want to show you exactly what the data says about where most people actually land, why the number is what it is, what specifically separates the people who arrive somewhere better, and what you can do about it regardless of where you currently stand. Start with the data because the data is the foundation, and the data is worse than most people know. The Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances is the most comprehensive analysis of American household wealth produced. It surveys thousands of households every 3 years and produces figures that financial institutions tend not to feature prominently in their advertising. For households with a primary earner between 55 and 64 people in the final decade of their working lives, the median retirement savings is approximately $134,000. That is the middle. Half of all households approaching retirement have less than $134,000 saved. For households already in retirement age 65 to 74, the median drops further to approximately $88,000 to $91,000 as people draw down savings while Social Security becomes the primary income source. The average is much higher, somewhere around $400,000, but the gap between that mean and the median reveals the distribution's actual shape. A relatively small number of households with very large balances pull the average dramatically upward. Remove them, and you see that most people retire with a number that looks like the one on that advisor's screen. Not a catastrophic number, not the result of obvious recklessness, just the quiet, compounded result of default financial behavior across 4 decades. Now, let the number translate into lived experience so it stops being abstract. Someone retiring with $91,000, using the 4% safe withdrawal rule, the standard framework for sustainable retirement income can draw approximately $3,640 per year from their portfolio. That is $303 per month from savings. Add the current average Social Security benefit of approximately $1,900 monthly, and total retirement income reaches about $2,203 per month. That is $26,436 per year to cover housing, food, healthcare, transportation, utilities, and every other expense of a real human life that does not stop having costs because a career has ended. The federal poverty line for a single adult is approximately $15,000 annually. The median retiree is not in poverty by official definition, but the gap between $26,436 and poverty is not large enough to absorb the unpredictable expenses that retirement reliably produces. One significant medical event, one major home repair, one car that requires replacement. Any single unexpected cost of meaningful size lands on a budget that has no slack and creates a crisis from which recovery on a fixed income is genuinely difficult. This is what the number actually means when it stops being a statistic and starts being a Tuesday. Before the failure points, one context that makes the median number even more sobering than it initially appears: the generation currently retiring with $91,000 median savings had structural advantages that younger generations are losing or have already lost. Many of them built careers during an era when defined benefit pensions, employer-funded retirement income guaranteed for life, were standard features of employment rather than relics. Many purchased homes when housing costs represented 2 to 3 times annual income rather than 5 to 7. Many had decades of stable employment with a single institution that provided genuine benefits, genuine job security, and genuine retirement contributions on their behalf. These structural tailwinds are largely gone. 401k plans have replaced pensions and shifted every element of retirement risk from employer to employee. Housing affordability has deteriorated dramatically relative to wage growth. Job stability has declined while healthcare costs have accelerated. The generation arriving at retirement with median savings of $91,000 had significant advantages that helped produce even that inadequate number. The generation coming behind them navigates steeper headwinds toward the same destination. Without deliberate behavioral changes, the retirement crisis does not stabilize. It compounds. Now, the specific failure points, because understanding where the money disappears reveals exactly where intervention is possible. The first failure point is simply never starting, and the compounding cost of delay is larger than most people's intuition suggests. The most powerful variable in retirement outcomes is not how much you save, it is when you begin. Compound interest does not distribute its returns evenly across time, it concentrates them at the beginning. The earliest contributions produce the largest long-term returns because they have the most time to compound on top of themselves. Here is the calculation that makes this visceral. Someone who saves $200 per month from age 22 to age 32 10 years and then stops contributing entirely arrives at 65 with approximately $285,000 at 7% average annual return. Someone who saves the same $200 per month from age 35 to 65, 30 years of continuous contributions, arrives with approximately $243,000. 10 years of early saving produces more retirement wealth than 30 years of late saving. The person who stops at 32 beats the person who starts at 35 and never stops. The math is counterintuitive until you understand that what compounding rewards above everything else is time, specifically early time. Most people's 20s disappear into lifestyle establishment, debt management, and the genuine difficulty of financial education that nobody provides systematically. Each year of delay in that decade costs more than any year of delay in any subsequent decade. The first dollar invested at 22 becomes the largest dollar in the portfolio by 65. The first dollar invested at 35 becomes the second largest, but the first dollar never invested becomes the most expensive dollar of all. The second failure point is contribution rate collapse in the middle decades. Many people who begin saving in their 20s reduce or eliminate contributions in their 30s and 40s. Children arrive, houses are purchased, lifestyle expands to absorb income growth. The retirement contributions that were automatic become temporarily paused when the expense categories competing for that money multiply. The temporary pause extends. 6 months becomes a year becomes 3. 3 years becomes most of the 40s. By the time contributions resume, the compounding window on those missed years has closed, and the mathematics of catching up are genuinely daunting. Consider two people both earning $60,000 annually. One saves 15% consistently from 25 to 65. One saves 15% through their 20s, reduces to 4% through the 30s and 40s, then increases back to 15% from 50 onward. The consistent saver accumulates approximately $1.15 million. The inconsistent saver, despite the same income and the same long-term intentions, accumulates approximately $680,000. The middle decade reduction cost $470,000 in retirement wealth, not through recklessness, through a pause that felt temporary and proved permanent in its consequences. The third failure point is treating retirement accounts as accessible savings during job transitions. Approximately 40% of workers cash out their retirement accounts when changing employers rather than rolling them into new plans or individual retirement accounts. The cash received feels real and present. The cost paid is invisible until much later. A 29-year-old who cashes out a $14,000 401k receives approximately $9,800 after the 10% early withdrawal penalty and income taxes. They paid $4,200 immediately for the privilege of accessing that money. But the true cost is what $14,000 compounds into over 36 years at 7%, average annual return, approximately $185,000. They did not cash out $14,000. They cashed out $185,000 in future retirement wealth and received $9,800 for it. This behavior, repeated across multiple job transitions in a working lifetime, accounts for an enormous portion of the gap between where people expect to arrive at retirement and where they actually land. The fourth failure point is the assumption that catching up will be possible. The mathematics of retirement savings are not linear. The further into a career you begin meaningfully saving, the higher the monthly contribution required to reach the same destination. Someone targeting $500,000 at retirement who starts at 25 needs approximately $285 per month at 8% average annual return. Starting the same goal at 35 requires $650 per month. Starting at 45 requires $1,475 per month. The monthly requirement does not double with each decade of delay, it multiplies. And most people's expense structures in their late 40s and 50s do not accommodate a tripling of their monthly savings rate, however genuine the intention becomes. The assumption that catching up will be manageable later is the assumption that quietly produces $91,000 at 65. The fifth failure point is investment allocation, the gap that most people cannot see because it is expressed in the difference between numbers that do not exist yet. Many workers who do save consistently keep contributions in default stable value funds or money market accounts, earning 2% to 3% annually because no one explained the alternative clearly and the default option requires no decision. Someone saving $350 per month for 35 years at 3% annual return accumulates approximately $255,000. The same $350 per month at 7% annual return accumulates approximately $570,000. Same person, same savings rate, same discipline, same years, $315,000 in different retirement outcomes produced entirely by where the money was placed. Both people made identical sacrifices to save that money. One retires with more than double the result of the other simply because of investment allocation. If the numbers in this conversation are making your own situation feel clearer, either as confirmation that you are on the right track, or as a signal that something needs to change, take 2 seconds and hit the like button. It genuinely helps the channel and I appreciate everyone. Now, the other side. What specifically separates the people who arrive somewhere better? The first differentiator is automation, not discipline. Automation. People who retire comfortably did not rely on monthly willpower to make a savings decision. They set up automatic contributions early enough that the decision was architectural rather than behavioral. The money moved from paycheck to retirement account before their spending patterns had any opportunity to incorporate it. They built their lifestyle around what remained. People who retire with $91,000 almost universally relied on manual saving, intending to transfer whatever was left over after spending. The problem with saving what is left over is that there is almost never anything left over. Not because of irresponsibility, because spending naturally expands to occupy available income unless the retirement contribution is removed from availability before spending begins. The second differentiator is savings rate. Comfortable retirees consistently saved between 15% and 20% of income throughout their working lives. People retiring at the median save closer to 4% to 6%. On a $65,000 income, the difference between 5% and 15% is $542 per month, approximately $18 per day. Over 35 years, at 7% average annual return, that $18 daily difference produces approximately $680,000 in different retirement outcomes. The gap between Margaret calculating whether she can afford her medications and the retiree who traveled to 3 countries last year is $18 per day, maintained consistently across a working lifetime. Here is the action plan organized by where you currently stand. If you are in your 20s, the single most important action is starting before this week ends. Not optimizing, not researching the perfect fund selection. Starting. Open the account, set the automatic contribution at whatever percentage is currently possible, and capture the full employer match if one exists. The employer match is a guaranteed 50% to 100% return on the matched portion. No investment available anywhere produces a guaranteed return of that magnitude. Then increase your contribution rate by 1 percentage point every time your income increases before lifestyle expansion absorbs the difference. If you are in your 30s or 40s, this month pull up every retirement account you hold and check 2 things: your current contribution rate and your investment allocation. If you are below 10% contribution rate, calculate what increasing by 3 percentage points would cost you in monthly take-home pay and whether your current lifestyle genuinely requires that amount. If your contributions are sitting in a stable value fund or money market account, move them to a broad market index fund with a low expense ratio. That single allocation change could double your retirement outcome over the remaining horizon with no change in savings behavior. If you are in your 50s with less saved than you need, 2 actions carry the highest leverage. First, if you are 50 or older, the IRS permits catch-up contributions to retirement accounts above the standard annual limit. Use them completely if your income allows. Second, model the difference between retiring at 65 versus 67. 2 additional working years add contributions at the peak of your earning power, add 2 years of compounding, and remove 2 years from the period your portfolio must sustain. The impact on your final number is typically larger than 2 years of aggressive catch-up saving within a single decade. For everyone, never cash out a retirement account during a job transition. Roll it over. The $9,800 you receive today cost $185,000 in retirement wealth. That trade is never worth it. Margaret is a real person. Not this specific Margaret, but she is real in the sense that she represents the median, and the median represents millions of actual people navigating actual retirement on $2,200 per month with no room for the unexpected. She did not fail in any obvious way. She worked, she showed up, she raised a family. She made the reasonable decisions that accumulated into an unreasonable outcome, not because the decisions were wrong individually, but because their cumulative effect, compounded across decades, produced a retirement she would not have chosen if anyone had shown her the mathematics clearly enough to act on when acting would have mattered. The number $91,000 is not a moral judgment. It is the output of default behavior of the financial decisions most people make when no one explains the compounding consequences clearly enough or early enough to change them. Default behavior produces default outcomes. Different behavior, applied consistently across the same timeline, produces outcomes that look nothing like the median. You are watching this conversation at a point in your life when the timeline still has length in it. The compounding table is still open. The decisions that produce comfortable retirement versus the scheduling desk at 67 are not made in a single dramatic moment. They are made in the daily accumulation of small choices, the contribution that gets automated rather than manual, the account that gets rolled over rather than cashed out, the investment allocation that gets placed in an index fund rather than a stable value default, the savings rate that increases with income rather than staying fixed while lifestyle expands. I'm Zik. The median does not have to be your destination. It is simply where default behavior arrives. You now know what default behavior costs. What you do with that knowledge from here is the only question that matters.